He bought the company to strip it for parts and walk away richer. She was the secretary who knew every secret, every soul inside those walls, and the only one brave enough to stand in his way. What started as a takeover became the one deal neither saw coming. Loved out of the idea of a ruthless billionaire clashing with the heart of his new company, and falling hard for its fiercest protector. Already has you hooked? Drop a below right now and tell me you're ready for the tension, the sparks, and the redemption. Welcome back, my wonderful family and friends. If you're tuned in and ready to dive into today's story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Tomorrow, I'll be bringing you another exciting story you definitely don't want to miss. So, let's get started. Alexander Vance stepped off his Gulfstream at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International just after 8 p.m., black overcoat over charcoal suit, no entourage, only a slim leather portfolio and the quiet certainty that the next 48 hours would change a company forever. 44, tall, lean, dark hair silvering at the temples, eyes the color of slate after rain. Founder and CEO of Vance Capital Partners, private equity firm known for buying undervalued assets, optimizing ruthlessly, and exiting with triple-digit returns. Forbes called him the Quiet Reaper. He didn't mind the name. Horizon Logistics was next. Mid-sized freight and supply chain firm headquartered in a low-rise office park near the perimeter. 43 years old. Steady but stagnant. Founder retired last year. Second-generation CEO struggling with rising fuel costs, driver shortages, and debt from a poorly timed warehouse expansion. Vance Capital had quietly acquired 62% of the shares over 18 months, enough to force a board vote. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., Alexander would walk into the executive conference room and announce the acquisition was complete. He didn't expect resistance. He never did. Leslie Carter arrived at Horizon at 6:45 a.m., same as every weekday for the past 11 years. 31. Chestnut hair pulled into a low knot, warm hazel eyes that missed nothing, sensible heels that clicked with purpose down the hallway. Executive assistant to the CEO, though assistant never captured it. She was the institutional memory, knew every client's birthday, every driver's route preference, every unpaid invoice that could be gently nudged. When the founder retired, she'd stayed on to help the new CEO navigate. When he faltered, she quietly kept the lights on. This morning the office hummed with nervous energy. Rumors had been circulating for weeks. The all-hands meeting at 9 a.m. was mandatory. No agenda listed, just important update from ownership. Leslie's desk was already organized. Files prepped for the new owner, coffee brewing, employee directory printed and highlighted with notes on who had kids, who was close to retirement, who couldn't afford another layoff. She didn't know who was coming, but she knew what usually followed private equity takeovers. Synergies, right-sizing, streamlining. She'd seen it happen to 3 other companies in the industry. She wouldn't let it happen here without a fight. At 8:55, the executive team filed into the conference room. 10 people, faces pale. The CEO, Robert Ellis, 61, kind but tired, sat at the head, hands folded. Leslie took her usual chair to his right, notepad open, pen ready. At 9:01, the door opened. Alexander walked in alone. No team, no lawyers, just him in the charcoal suit, carrying nothing but confidence. The room stilled. He didn't sit. Stood at the head of the table opposite Robert. "Good morning," he said, voice low, calm, carrying without effort. "I'm Alexander Vance. As of 12:01 this morning, Vance Capital Partners owns controlling interest in Horizon Logistics. Effective immediately, I'm assuming the role of executive chairman. Robert will remain CEO during transition. My goal is simple: stabilize, grow, and create long-term value for all stakeholders." Silence. Leslie's pen didn't move. Alexander's gaze swept the room, methodical, assessing. Landed on her last. "Ms. Carter, I presume?" he said. "I've read your memos. You know this company better than anyone in this room. I'll need your support during integration." She met his eyes steady. "You have my professional cooperation, Mr. Vance. You do not have my blind loyalty." A small, surprised smile touched his mouth. Gone in an instant. "Noted." He turned back to the group. No immediate layoffs. No office closures. We'll review operations over the next 90 days. My team arrives tomorrow. Questions? Hands stayed down. Meeting adjourned at 9:12. Leslie stayed behind to clear notepads and coffee cups. Habit? Alexander lingered too. She felt him watching. Ms. Carter, he said quietly. She turned. Leslie. Leslie. He stepped closer, professional distance. I don't expect blind loyalty. I expect competence. You clearly have that. I'd like you to stay on as my executive assistant during the transition. Same salary. Same benefits. Additional stipend if you'd like. She studied him, searching for the catch. Why me? Because you know where the bodies are buried. And because you're not afraid to tell me when I'm wrong. She gave a small, humorless laugh. You might regret that. I doubt it. She considered. The money would help. Her mother's medical debt was still lingering, even after insurance. But more than that, if she left, who would protect the people here? I'll stay, she said. But understand this. I'll fight for every job that doesn't need to be cut. I'll fight for every driver, every dispatcher, every warehouse worker who's given their life to this place. If you're here to gut it, you'll have to go through me. He held her gaze long, assessing. Challenge accepted, he said softly. Then he walked out. Leslie stood alone in the conference room, heart pounding. The takeover had begun, and so had something else. If Leslie's you do not have my blind loyalty or Alexander's quiet challenge accepted. Already has you feeling the slow burn power dynamic? Drop A or your favorite beat below. The first week after the acquisition announcement felt like walking into a room where everyone had stopped breathing. Horizon Logistics' open plan office, once filled with the steady murmur of phone calls, keyboard clacks, and the occasional burst of laughter from the dispatch team, now carried a hush that pressed against the ears. Employees spoke in low voices near the coffee station. Managers kept their doors closed longer than usual. The break room fridge still had the same sticky notes and expired yogurt, but no one joked about cleaning it out anymore. Leslie arrived at 6:45 a.m. every day, same as always. She brewed the first pot of coffee, dark roast, no decaf. Alexander had requested it during his introductory walkthrough, sorted the overnight emails, and prepared the executive summary packet for the 9 a.m. leadership huddle. She didn't change her routine. Routine was armor. Alexander arrived at 8:55, never early, never late. Black coffee already in hand from the cafe downstairs. He'd learned quickly that Horizon's brew was serviceable but not worth the stomachache. He wore the same charcoal suit every day that first week, as if the uniform itself signaled control. No tie, top button undone. Sleeves rolled precisely twice. He took over the corner office that had belonged to Robert Ellis. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the loading yard, where drivers still backed rigs into bays with practiced precision. The nameplate on the door still read Robert Ellis, CEO. Alexander hadn't asked for it to be changed. Leslie's desk sat directly outside that door, strategic placement from years ago, so she could screen visitors, field calls, and keep the CEO's day from derailing. Now it meant she was the first person Alexander saw every morning and the last he passed on the way out. Day 1. He paused at her desk. Ms. Carter. Leslie, she corrected, quiet, firm. Leslie. A small nod. I need the full driver roster, seniority list, and current union contract by 10 a.m. Also, the last 3 years of fuel hedging reports. She didn't blink. They're already in your inbox. Sorted by date with highlights on the 3 largest cost overruns. Union contract is tabbed at the sections most likely to trigger grievances during restructuring. He studied her longer than necessary. Efficient. That's the job. He gave a single nod and disappeared into the office. She exhaled, slow, controlled. Day 2. He emerged at 11:17 with a single sheet of paper, her summary of the fuel hedging losses. This is thorough. She didn't look up from her screen. I've been tracking fuel costs since 2014. I know where the bleeding started. He leaned one hip against her desk. Casual but deliberate. You flagged the 2021 supplier switch as the primary cause. Management ignored your memo. They did. Why stay? She met his eyes then, direct. Because the people who drive the trucks, load the trailers, answer the phones at 3 a.m. when a shipment's lost, they're good people. They deserve someone who remembers their names and fights for their jobs. Even when the people signing the checks don't. Silence stretched, 2 beats, 3. He straightened. I'm not here to destroy Horizon. I'm here to save it. Then prove it, she said softly. Start with the people. He held her gaze another second, something unreadable flickering behind the steel, then walked away. Day 3. The first cost-cutting memo leaked. It wasn't official yet, but someone in finance had forwarded Alexander's preliminary analysis to the wrong distribution list. 3 bullet points stood out. Reduce driver headcount by 18% through attrition and selective redundancy. Consolidate 2 satellite terminals into 1, Atlanta South closure. Outsource payroll and benefits administration. By noon, the office was electric with fear. Drivers gathered in the break room, voices low and angry. Dispatchers whispered near the printers. Leslie felt it like a pressure change before a storm. She marched into Alexander's office without knocking. First time she'd done that. He looked up from his laptop, eyebrows raised, not angry. You saw the memo, he said. Not a question. Everyone saw it. She closed the door behind her. It's not even signed, but it's circulating like wildfire. Drivers are talking about walking out. Clients are already calling to confirm rumors. He leaned back in the chair. It's a draft. Preliminary modeling. Nothing's been decided. Then kill it. Publicly. Today. He studied her, calm. Assessing. You want me to walk into the bullpen and promise no layoffs? I want you to walk in there and tell the truth. Tell them you're reviewing everything. Tell them no decisions are final. Give them something to hold onto besides fear. He exhaled, slow, measured. Fear motivates. Fear destroys loyalty. And loyalty is what's kept Horizon alive through recessions, fuel spikes, and every other crisis. You want to save this company? Start by saving the people who make it run. Silence. He stood. Come with me. She blinked. What? You know the names. The stories. I don't. If I'm going to do this, I need you there. She hesitated only a second, then nodded. They walked into the open plan area together. Conversations died instantly. Eyes followed them, wary, angry, hopeful. Alexander stopped in the center of the floor, near the coffee station where everyone could see and hear. I know the memo is circulating, he began, voice carrying without shouting. It's a draft. Nothing more. No layoffs have been approved. No terminals are closing. No outsourcing decisions have been made. I bought Horizon because it has value, real value. That value isn't just in the trucks and the contracts. It's in the people who show up every day, in every weather, at every hour to make sure freight moves and customers are served. I don't intend to throw that away. Murmurs rippled. Some skeptical, some relieved. I'm here for 90 days to understand the business, not destroy it. Leslie Carter, he gestured to her, is going to be my guide. She knows this company better than anyone. If you have concerns, questions, ideas, bring them to her. She'll bring them to me. No filter. No spin. He looked around the room, meeting eyes, holding them. I'm not promising miracles, but I am promising this. No decision will be made without understanding the human cost. That's all for now. Back to work. We've got freight to move. He turned and walked back toward his office. Leslie followed, heart pounding in the hallway outside his door. She stopped him. You didn't have to do that. I did. He met her eyes. You were right. Fear destroys loyalty. I need loyalty if I'm going to turn this around. She searched his face, looking for the angle, the catch. Found none. Thank you, she said quietly. He gave a small nod. Don't thank me yet. 90 days is a long time. But something had shifted. The next weeks were a slow, relentless unfolding. Alexander relied on Leslie more than he'd expected. She sat in every major meeting, silent at first, then speaking when numbers didn't tell the whole story. She knew why driver 47 always requested the northern routes. His wife had chemo in Chattanooga every third week. She knew why the Atlanta South terminal couldn't close without losing half the local customer base. Personal relationships with shippers built over decades. She knew which supervisors would quit rather than fire their teams, and which ones would stay no matter what. He listened. Not always agreeing. Not always yielding. But listening. Late nights became routine. 10 p.m. in his office. Spreadsheets glowing. Takeout containers piling up. She'd kick off her heels, tuck her legs under her on the guest chair, and challenge his assumptions. "You're looking at overtime as pure cost," she said one night, pointing at a column. "But those drivers are the ones who cover breakdowns, who stay late when a shipment's delayed. Cut overtime and you cut reliability. Clients leave when trucks don't show." He stared at the numbers, then at her. "You're right." She blinked, surprised. He leaned back. "I'm not used to being told I'm wrong." "Get used to it," she said, half-smile. "I don't sugarcoat." He smiled, small, real. First time she'd seen it reach his eyes. "You're dangerous, Leslie Carter. You have no idea." They worked until 1 a.m. that night. When she stood to leave, he stood too. "I'll walk you to your car. It's in the garage. Security's fine." Still, they rode the elevator down together, quiet, but not awkward. In the parking garage, her old Civic looked small next to his black Range Rover. She paused at her door. "Thank you for listening tonight. Thank you for making me." She looked up at him long, searching. He stepped closer. Not crowding, just closer. "Leslie?" She didn't move away. He leaned down, slow, giving her every chance to stop him. She didn't. Their first kiss was tentative, lips brushing, testing. Then deeper. His hand cupping her face, her fingers gripping his lapel. Not desperate. Not performative. Just inevitable. When they parted, both breathing hard, she whispered, "This complicates everything." "I know." She searched his eyes. "We're still on opposite sides." "Not anymore," he said softly. "Not tonight." She smiled, small, vulnerable. "We'll see." She got in her car. Drove away. He stood in the garage until her taillights disappeared. The next morning she arrived at 6:45, same routine. But when he walked past her desk, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. The kiss wasn't mentioned. Not yet. But it changed everything. The board pushed harder, daily calls demanding faster synergies. Alexander pushed back, citing Leslie's data, her stories, her warnings. Layoffs were scaled back. The Atlanta South terminal stayed open with a leaner staff, but open. Employees noticed. Drivers started nodding to Alexander in the yard instead of looking away. Dispatchers stopped whispering when he walked by. Leslie noticed 2.1 evening. 3 weeks after the kiss, they were alone in his office again. Rain tapped the windows. Takeout boxes empty. Spreadsheets forgotten. She stood to leave. He caught her wrist. Gentle. "Stay." She looked down at his hand, then up at him. "Why?" "Because I don't want you to go." She stepped closer. "This isn't part of the job description." "I know." She searched his face. Long searching. Then rose on her toes and kissed him, slow, deliberate, full of everything they'd been holding back. They didn't stop at the office. They moved to the couch. Clothes shed slowly, hands learning, breaths mingling. No rush, no pretense. Just two people finally letting the walls fall. Afterward, tangled, breathless, she rested her head on his chest. "This doesn't change the numbers," she whispered. "I know. It doesn't change the board." "I know." She lifted her head. "Then what does it change?" He brushed hair from her face. "Everything else." They kissed again, longer, softer. And for the first time, Alexander Vance understood that some acquisitions were worth more than any balance sheet could measure. If that rain-tapped office kiss, the quiet, stay, or the way he chose listening over cutting already has your heart racing, drop a comment below. The 90-day clock hit zero on a Thursday in early November. The kind of gray Atlanta morning where the sky seems to press down on the low-rise office park like a lid on a simmering pot. Horizon Logistics was no longer bleeding. The numbers told a story Alexander Vance had never quite expected to write. Fuel hedging losses, once hemorrhaging six figures quarterly, had been stanched and reversed, down 14% after Leslie unearthed a stack of her own 3-year-old memos and turned them into negotiation ammunition. Supplier contracts were rewritten with sharper teeth. Driver retention held at 92%, the highest in the regional peer group, thanks to a quiet program Alexander approved. Performance bonuses tied not to miles driven but to incident-free runs and on-time delivery streaks. The Atlanta South Terminal, once slated for consolidation, remained open, reconfigured with cross-training that preserved 27 full-time positions while trimming only seasonal overtime. First quarter forward bookings were up 11%. Customer churn had flatlined. The employee satisfaction survey, anonymous and brutal in years past, came back with the highest scores since the founder retired. The board in New York noticed every decimal point. They noticed too much. Alexander boarded the Gulf Stream alone at 6:15 a.m. He'd kissed Leslie in the shadowed corner of the employee parking lot an hour earlier. Quick, urgent. His hand cupping the back of her neck as if memorizing the shape of her. Her hair was still sleep musk, her breath warm against his collar. "Whatever they say," she'd whispered. "You come back to me. I will." She'd held his gaze one beat longer than usual. "Promise." He'd nodded once. Then he was gone. The boardroom on the 53rd floor smelled of polished mahogany and quiet menace. Central Park sprawled gold and rust below the glass wall. 7 partners waited, suits immaculate, expressions already carved into the polite neutrality they reserved for difficult conversations. Alexander walked in carrying nothing but a slim tablet. No entourage, no lawyers, just him. He presented for 37 minutes without flourish. Slide after slide of clean metrics. Cost takeout without carnage, organic growth without smoke and mirror accounting, loyalty metrics trending upward for the first time in a decade. He ended on a single bullet point in 24-point type. Recommendation: retain and invest. Projected 5-year IRR, 27 to 31%. Sustainable platform value. The room stayed quiet for 5 seconds after the screen went dark. Then the first partner, mid-40s, hedge fund polish, the one who always spoke first, leaned forward. "Stabilization is admirable, Alex. Truly. But stabilization is table stakes. The mandate is superior returns. The freight M&A window is wide open right now. Cisco Freight is paying 8.2 times EBITDA for quality regional carriers. We sell the core routes, parcel out the real estate to industrial REITs, keep the brand shell for a tuck-in, and we clear north of $400 million net to the fund. That's 38% IRR in 18 months. Why settle for 27/5? Another partner, older, silver at the temples, the original architect of Vance Capital's reputation, tapped his pen once. "You've done what you were hired to do. You turned red to black. Congratulations. Now exit. Clean. Hi. That's the model." Alexander's voice remained low, even. "The model assumes assets are fungible. Horizon isn't. Its value lives in sticky regional relationships, driver tenure, dispatcher knowledge of backroad shortcuts that shave hours off hauls. Strip the routes, sell the terminals, and you don't just lose revenue, you lose the intangible that makes the revenue possible. Keep investing, modest capex, targeted hiring, employee ownership incentives, and we build a durable platform worth 3 times the entry price in 7 years." The silver-haired partner studied him for a long moment. "You're personally invested. I'm invested in delivering outsized returns to our LPs." "No," the word landed softly. "You're invested in her." The temperature in the room dropped. Alexander didn't flinch. "Leslie Carter has institutional knowledge no outside consultant could replicate in a year. Her input has already saved us $8 million in avoided missteps. That isn't emotion. That's asymmetric information. Information doesn't make a man tell his own board to go to hell," the younger partner said. "We're authorizing a 60-day accelerated exit process. Marketing starts Monday. If you want to bid as a management group, you're welcome to. Otherwise, we'll handle the divestiture." Alexander stood. "I'm not selling." He walked out before the vote was called. He didn't need to hear it on the flight back. He sat in the dim cabin, city lights sliding beneath the wing like scattered coins. For the first time in 2 decades he felt the absence of certainty. Not fear, exactly, but a strange, hollow freedom. He had spent his adult life acquiring control. Now control had slipped through his fingers, and all he could think about was a woman in sensible heels who had never once looked away when he tried to intimidate her. He landed at 5:47 a.m. local. Called her from the tarmac. "Office. I'm 10 minutes out." She was waiting in the hallway when he stepped off the elevator. Hair pulled back, coffee already brewed on her desk, hazel eyes scanning his face for damage. He didn't speak until they were inside his office with the door closed. He told her everything. The push for the quick flip, the personal jab, the 60-day clock, the line he'd drawn in the sand. When he finished she stood very still, arms crossed, breathing measured. "You just burned Vance Capital to the ground," she said quietly. "Probably. For Horizon Logistics. For the 218 families who depend on those paychecks. For the drivers who still wave when they back a trailer into Bay 7. For the dispatcher who remembers every client's kid's name." He stepped closer. "For you." Her breath caught that he took her hands. Careful, deliberate. "I love you, Leslie. Not because you're the perfect executive assistant. Not because you know where every skeleton is buried. I love you because the first thing you ever said to me was that I didn't have your blind loyalty. You looked me in the eye and refused to bend. You've been refusing to bend ever since. You made me listen when listening was the last thing I wanted to do. You made me want things I didn't know I could want. A company that lasts. A life that means something. You." Tears shimmered along her lower lids, but she blinked them back. "You're giving up your firm, your reputation, everything you built. I'm choosing something I never had before." His voice dropped. If you'll have me." She searched his face, looking for the escape hatch, the contingency plan, the angle he always kept in reserve. There was none. She stepped into him, arms sliding around his neck, and kissed him. Slow at first, then fierce, like she needed to mark him as hers before the world could take him back. When they parted she rested her forehead against his. "We're going to war," she whispered. "I know. Then we fight dirty," she said, a small, dangerous smile curving her mouth. "Because I'm not losing this company. And I'm not losing you." The next 52 days were a slow-motion siege. Alexander resigned from Vance Capital the following Tuesday. The partners bought out his stake at a 40% discount. Silent retribution. He signed without argument. Every dollar flowed straight into the escrow account for what came next. They launched a management-led buyout. Robert Ellis agreed to stay on as CEO, figurehead with real authority. Leslie became de facto chief strategist, working 18-hour days. Calling banks that had already said no, rallying the executive team, quietly meeting with the informal driver leadership group in the break room at 3 a.m. to explain the plan. Alexander worked the Rolodex he'd spent 20 years building. Family offices hungry for stable cash flow, pension funds tired of private equity strip plays, even 2 former competitors who respected what he'd done at Horizon instead of dismantling it. Money was tight. Term sheets came back brutal. One bank offered 71% loan-to-value at 11.2% interest. Another demanded personal guarantees Alexander no longer wanted to give. Doubt arrived at predictable hours, 2:17 a.m., for 42 a.m. When the spreadsheets refused to balance point one night, Leslie found him sitting on the floor of his office, back against the couch, staring at a rejected commitment letter. "We're short $43 million, he said, voice flat. She sank down beside him, shoulder to shoulder. "Then we closed the gap." They did. Leslie convinced the drivers group to roll 20% of their next 2 years' profit sharing into an employee stock ownership pool. Real skin in the game. The gesture moved a conservative family office in Birmingham enough to commit the final tranche. Alexander sold his Buckhead house, the modernist glass box he'd barely lived in, and wired the equity straight to escrow. No second thoughts. They slept in snatches on the office couch, ate cold takeout, argued over interest rate swaps at dawn. Closing arrived on a sleet-slanted Thursday in mid-December. The conference room downtown smelled of burnt coffee and wet wool coats. Signatures scratched across pages. Horizon Logistics emerged independent again. 63% employee-owned through the new ESOP. Alexander as non-executive chairman with 31%, Robert as CEO, Leslie officially named Chief Operating Officer. No press release. No champagne. Just a company-wide email at 4:19 p.m. The company is ours again. Thank you for your trust. Freight moves tomorrow, same as always. Alexander, Leslie, Robert. That night they drove north to a rented cabin outside Dahlonega. No heat complaints, just a stone fireplace and a view of bare trees against a bruised sky. They collapsed on the rug in front of the fire, too exhausted to speak for nearly an hour. Eventually Leslie curled against his side, head on his chest. "We did it," she said softly. "We did." She tilted her face up. "You walked away from everything. I walked toward the only thing that ever mattered." He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "Marry me." She laughed, surprised, tired, happy. "You're proposing on a cabin floor after we just gambled our futures on a trucking company? I'm proposing because we gambled and won. Because I don't want another exit strategy. I want forever with you challenging me, fighting me, loving me, every single day." Tears slipped free this time. She didn't hide them. "Yes," she whispered. He kissed her then. Slow, reverent, tasting of wood smoke and hard-won peace. Outside, sleet tapped the windows like quiet applause. If the boardroom silence, the floor-level proposal in front of the fire, or the way they chose each other over empires already has your heart in knots. Drop a below. The sleet had turned to cold rain by the time they left the downtown conference room on that December afternoon. Horizon Logistics was independent again. Paperwork signed, funds wired, keys metaphorically handed back. But no one felt like celebrating yet. The victory tasted like exhaustion and adrenaline sweat. Alexander drove them north out of the city in silence, wipers sweeping rhythmically across the windshield of the rented black SUV. Leslie sat in the passenger seat, bare feet tucked under her on the heated leather, staring at the blurred taillights ahead. Neither spoke for the first 40 minutes. The weight of the last 52 days pressed against the windows like the weather outside. When they finally reached the small cabin near Dahlonega, the gravel drive crunched under the tires. Alexander killed the engine. Rain drummed on the metal roof. Leslie broke the quiet first. "We actually did it." He looked over at her, profile lit by the dashboard glow, eyes still sharp despite the fatigue carved into the lines around them. "We did." She unbuckled, turned toward him. "You sold your house. Needed the cash. You didn't even hesitate. I didn't need to." She studied him in the dim light. "That place was you. Glass walls, city view, everything controlled. It was a place to sleep. This?" He gestured vaguely between them, at the rain-smeared windshield, at the dark pines beyond. "This is home." Her throat moved. She leaned across the console and kissed him. Slow, grateful, tasting faintly of the mints she'd popped during the final signature session. When she pulled back she whispered, "Inside, before we freeze." The cabin was simple. Pine walls, stone fireplace already laid with logs by the rental service. One bedroom with a quilt that smelled faintly of cedar. They didn't bother unpacking. Alexander built a fire while Leslie opened the bottle of red they'd grabbed from a gas station on the way up. Nothing fancy, just something to mark the moment. They sat on the rug in front of the hearth, backs against the couch, glasses in hand. Flames snapped and popped. Rain hissed against the windows. Leslie spoke first again. "Tell me what you're thinking, right now." He stared into the fire. "That I should feel like I lost something massive. Vance Capital. The board seat. The reputation I spent 20 years building. The quiet reaper doesn't walk away from a fund. He dismantles it or sells it. Instead I'm sitting on a cabin floor drinking $8 wine after gambling everything on a regional trucking company. And I don't feel like I lost anything." He turned his head to look at her. "I feel lighter. Like I finally stopped carrying a weight I didn't even know was crushing me." She set her glass down. "You're not used to that." "No. You're used to winning by taking." "Yes." She reached for his hand, laced their fingers. "You won tonight by giving back. By listening to people who've never had a voice in those boardrooms. by choosing them over another zero on a balance sheet. He exhaled long, slow. I keep waiting for the regret to hit. It might. Tomorrow. Next month. When the first quarterly report comes in lower than Wall Street would have liked. He nodded once. But tonight, she continued, tonight we won, not because the numbers are perfect, because 218 families still have jobs Monday morning, because the drivers who've been whispering about walking out are instead planning overtime for the holiday rush, because we proved that ruthless doesn't have to mean heartless. He lifted their joined hands, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. You did that. We did that. She smiled, small, tired, real. Team effort. They sat in the firelight for a long time after that, not speaking, just breathing the same air. Eventually she leaned her head on his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her. Somewhere around midnight he said quietly, "Marry me." She laughed softly, surprise and warmth braided together. You already asked. In this exact spot. On this exact rug. I know. I want to hear it again. She lifted her head. Met his eyes, slate softened by firelight. Yes, she said. Again. Still. Always. He kissed her then. Deeper this time, slower, like he was memorizing every second. Hands moved. Clothes shed. They made love on the rug in front of the dying fire. Unhurried, reverent. Every touch a promise they'd fought to earn. Afterward they lay tangled under the quilt on the bed. Rain still tapping the roof. Leslie traced idle patterns on his chest. What happens Monday? Back to work. No fanfare. No. Just freight moving. Drivers clocking in. Dispatchers answering phones at 3 a.m. same as always. She smiled against his skin. I like that. Me too. Monday came too soon. They drove back to Atlanta in the pale winter dawn. Alexander dropped her at her apartment so she could change. He went straight to the office. By 7:15 a.m. the building was already humming. Same low murmur of phones and keyboards, but lighter somehow. No one whispered when he walked past. A few drivers in the break room actually nodded hello. Leslie arrived at 7:42 wearing the navy blazer she always wore on Mondays, hair in its familiar low knot. She set a fresh dark roast on his desk without comment that he looked up from the first stack of reports. Morning. Morning, Chairman. The title still felt strange. Non-executive chairman. No corner office takeover. Just a seat at the table he'd helped preserve. They fell into rhythm quickly. Robert Ellis ran day-to-day operations. Gentler now, steadier, buoyed by the fact that he no longer answered to private equity timelines. Leslie became the connective tissue. COO on paper, but in practice the person who still knew every driver's preferred route, every client's unspoken pain points, every unpaid invoice that could be gently coaxed into payment. Alexander focused on strategy, longer-term plays, securing a new line of credit at better terms, negotiating with a mid-sized shipper for dedicated lanes, exploring hybrid electric trailers for the fleet. Small bets, patient ones. They didn't hide the relationship. No point. Everyone had seen the way they moved around each other during the buyout fight. Shoulders brushing in hallways, quiet conferences behind closed doors that lasted too long to be strictly business. The office didn't gossip. It accepted. Drivers teased Alexander about finally getting domesticated. Dispatchers left congratulatory sticky notes on Leslie's monitor. One afternoon in late January, 3 weeks after closing. A senior driver, Marcus, 29 years hauling for Horizon, knocked on Alexander's open door. Got a minute, boss? Alexander waved him in. Always. Marcus closed the door, hat in his hands. Wanted to say, thank you. Not many men would have done what you did. Walked away from all that money. Fought the board. Put your own cash on the line. Alexander leaned back. Wasn't about the money. Marcus nodded slowly. I know. That's why I'm here. Me and a few of the guys we talked. We're putting 20% of our ESOP dividends back into the company for the next 2 years. Help pay down that new credit line faster. Keep the rates low. Alexander stared at him. You don't have to do that. We know. We want to. Marcus shrugged. You gave us a future. Least we can do is protect it. When Marcus left, Alexander sat motionless for a long minute. Then he texted Leslie one word. Come. She appeared 30 seconds later, closing the door behind her. He told her what Marcus said. She crossed to him, slid onto his lap without preamble, arms around his neck. See, she murmured. Loyalty isn't blind. It's earned. He buried his face in her hair. I'm still getting used to that. You've got time. Spring arrived slowly, dogwoods blooming along the perimeter, pollen dusting every windshield in the yard. Horizon's first post-buyout quarterly report showed modest profit. Nothing spectacular, but green across every line that mattered. The board, now just Alexander, Robert, Leslie, and 2 elected employee reps, reviewed it in the same conference room where the takeover had been announced and no champagne. Just coffee and quiet satisfaction. Afterward, Leslie lingered while the others filed out. Alexander stayed seated, watching her organize the handouts. You're smiling, he said. Am I? Yes. She walked over, perched on the edge of the table in front of him. I'm proud of us. He reached for her hand. I'm proud of you. She laced their fingers. We're not done fighting. I know. Fuel prices are climbing again. Driver shortage isn't going away. Insurance premiums keep rising. He nodded. We'll handle it. Together. Always. She leaned down and kissed him, soft, lingering. Right there in the conference room with the blinds half open and the loading yard visible beyond the glass, and no one looked away. No one needed to. By May the wedding planning had become its own quiet operation. Nothing extravagant. They chose the Horizon parking lot on a Saturday when the yard was still. No rigs moving, just empty bays and the faint smell of diesel lingering in the warm air. They strung cafe lights between the light poles. Picnic tables held barbecue from the place on Moreland Avenue everyone loved. Sweet tea in plastic pitchers. A local bluegrass trio volunteered to play, 2 drivers' cousins and a dispatcher's brother. Leslie's dress was simple ivory linen. Sleeveless, flowing, no train to catch on asphalt. She carried wildflowers she'd picked that morning from the edge of her apartment complex. Robert Ellis walked her down the makeshift aisle between rows of folding chairs filled with Horizon people. Drivers in pressed shirts, dispatchers with flowers pinned to blouses, warehouse crews in clean jeans and boots polished for once. Alexander waited under an arch they'd built from spare shipping straps and spring branches. Charcoal button-down, sleeves rolled to the elbows, no tie. When he saw her, his breath caught. Visible even from the back row, vows were short, spoken in voices that carried across the quiet lot. Alexander went first. I promise to listen, even when I think I already know the answer, especially then. Leslie smiled, small, fierce, familiar. I promise to keep telling you the truth, even when it's inconvenient, especially then. Laughter rippled through the guests, warm, knowing. Rings slid on. Simple platinum bands. A kiss followed, deep enough to draw appreciative whistles from the drivers in the back. Afterward, the toasts were brief and heartfelt. Marcus stood first, plastic cup of tea raised. To Alexander and Leslie. He came here planning to take us apart piece by piece. She planted herself in the doorway and said no. Together they gave us back what we thought we'd lost. Best damn deal this company ever made. Glasses clinked. Cheers rose. Music started, someone's phone speaker first, then the bluegrass trio joining in. People danced between the park trailers. Kids, drivers and dispatchers ran through the bays playing tag. Laughter bounced off metal siding. Alexander found Leslie at the edge of the crowd, away from the lights, looking out at the city glow on the horizon. Happy? He asked quietly. She leaned back against him, his arms coming around her waist. More than I knew how to be. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Good, because there are a lot of miles ahead. She turned in his arms, looked up at him. Then drive them with me. He kissed her again. Slow, certain, tasting like barbecue smoke and forever. Behind them the music played on. Trucks stood silent watch. Horizon Logistics, scarred, stubborn, alive, kept breathing into the Georgia night. If the parking lot vows, Marcus's toast, or that quiet promise at the edge of the crowd already has your heart full. Drop a below. The parking lot of Horizon Logistics looked different under strings of cafe lights. On that Saturday in late May, the asphalt still held the day's heat even as the sun dropped behind the western tree line. No trailers moved. No forklifts beeped. The yard was quiet except for the low thrum of conversation, the occasional laugh, and the soft twang of a bluegrass trio tuning up near bay for they had chosen this place deliberately. Not a church with stained glass and pews. Not a ballroom with crystal chandeliers. The parking lot, where drivers backed rigs at 4 a.m., where dispatchers ran out with forgotten paperwork, where warehouse crews smoked during breaks, was the only place that felt honest. Tables borrowed from the company picnic last summer lined up in uneven rows. Red and white checkered cloths fluttered in the breeze. Barbecue smoke drifted from the catered smokers parked near the fence. Pitchers of sweet tea sweated on every table. Plastic cups, paper plates, no assigned seating. Just people finding their own spots among friends. 218 employees had been invited. Almost everyone came. Kids ran between the empty trailer bays playing tag, their laughter bouncing off metal siding. Drivers who usually wore company polos had swapped them for button-downs that still smelled faintly of starch and Sunday mornings. Dispatchers wore sundresses and pinned flowers behind their ears. Warehouse crews traded steel toes for clean sneakers. Even Robert Ellis, 62 now, silver hair neatly combed, wore a tie for the first time in anyone's memory. Leslie waited in the small office trailer that served as a makeshift dressing room. The mirror above the sink was scratched and slightly warped, but it did the job. Her dress was simple ivory linen, sleeveless A-line, falling just below the knee so she could walk across gravel without tripping. No veil, no train, just a sprig of wildflowers tucked behind one ear, picked that morning from the strip of grass beside her apartment complex. She looked at herself in the mirror and exhaled slowly. 11 years of arriving at 6:45 a.m. 5 years of keeping the lights on when everyone else was ready to quit. 93 days of fighting a man who'd come to dismantle everything she loved. 52 days of fighting beside him to save it. And now this. A soft knock. Robert opened the door. "Ready, kid?" She smiled, small, steady. "As I'll ever be." He offered his arm. She took it. They stepped out into the golden late afternoon light. The bluegrass trio started playing. Wagon wheel, soft and rolling, as Robert walked her between the rows of folding chairs. Every face turned. Drivers straightened. Dispatchers dabbed eyes with napkins. Kids stopped running and stared wide-eyed. Alexander waited under the arch they'd built together 2 nights earlier. Spare shipping straps woven through branches of dogwood and redbud, wildflowers threaded through the gaps. He wore a charcoal button-down, sleeves rolled to the elbows, no tie, no jacket. Slate eyes locked on her the moment she appeared. His breath caught, visible, unguarded, and didn't release until she was close enough to see the faint tremor in his hands. Robert stopped at the arch, kissed Leslie's cheek, and placed her hand in Alexander's. Then he stepped back to join the front row. The officiant was a retired judge who'd handled Horizon's incorporation paperwork 30 years earlier. No long preamble. No poetry readings. Just the essentials. Alexander spoke first. "I, Alexander Vance, promise to listen, even when I'm certain I already know the answer. Especially then. I promise to choose the harder path when it's the right one. To stay when walking away would be easier. To build instead of break. To love you, not just the parts that fit neatly into my plans, but the parts that challenge them. Every day. For the rest of my life." His voice was low, steady, carrying across the quiet lot without effort. Leslie looked up at him, hazel eyes clear, unshaken. "I, Leslie Carter, promise to keep telling you the truth, even when it's inconvenient. Especially then. I promise to fight for you, for us, for the people who depend on this place. I promise to hold your hand when the numbers don't add up and the boardroom doors slam shut. To remind you that winning isn't always measured in returns. To love you, not just the man who learned to stay, but the man who once thought leaving was the only victory worth having. Every day. For the rest of my life." A ripple of soft laughter moved through the crowd, warm, knowing. Rings came next. Simple platinum bands. No diamonds. Just clean lines and quiet weight. Alexander slid hers on first. With this ring, I give you everything I have left to give. Leslie slid his on. With this ring, I accept everything you are, and everything will become. The judge smiled. By the power vested in me by the state of Georgia, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Alexander cupped her face with both hands, gentle, reverent, and kissed her. It wasn't performative. It wasn't rushed. It was deep and slow and certain, the kind of kiss that said they had already survived worse than any wedding day nerves. When they parted, the lot erupted, whistles from the drivers, cheers from the dispatchers, clapping from the warehouse crews, squeals from the kids. The bluegrass kicked up, Angeline the baker, and people started moving toward the food. Toasts came in waves. Marcus stood first, plastic cup of sweet tea raised high. To Alexander and Leslie. He rolled into town in a Gulf Stream with a plan to carve us up for parts. She stood square in the doorway, 5'6" and fearless, and said not today. Together they fought the board, the banks, the doubt. They gave us back our company. They gave us hope. And now they're giving each other forever. Best damn acquisition this place ever survived. Glasses clinked. Cheers rolled. A dispatcher named Carla went next, voice cracking only once. To the woman who remembered my daughter's birthday every year even when I forgot. And to the man who learned her name wasn't just the assistant. You two showed us that loyalty isn't weakness. It's strength. We're better because of you. More clinking. More tears. Robert Ellis stood last. Tie loosened now, sleeves rolled like everyone else. I've run this company longer than some of you have been alive. Watched it grow. Watched it stumble. Watched it almost disappear. I thought I'd seen every kind of leader. Then this man showed up. And this woman refused to let him win the easy way. Together they reminded me why I started in the first place. Not for the money. For the people. For the freight that keeps moving because someone cares enough to make sure it does. He raised his cup. To Alexander and Leslie. May your miles be long. Your loads be light. And your love be unbreakable. The cheers lasted longest for that one. People danced after that. Between the picnic tables, in the open bays under the lights. Kids twirled with grandparents. Drivers two-stepped with dispatchers. Someone started a line dance that quickly dissolved into laughter when half the participants forgot the steps. Alexander and Leslie moved through the crowd, hand in hand, accepting hugs, handshakes, backslaps. Every few minutes someone would pull them aside for a quiet word. A driver thanking them for keeping his route. A warehouse worker saying the ESOP dividends had paid off his daughter's braces. An older dispatcher admitting she'd been ready to retire until the buyout fight gave her something to fight for again. Eventually they slipped to the edge of the lot, away from the lights, near the chain-link fence that separated the yard from the service road. City glow smudged the horizon. Stars were starting to prick through. Alexander wrapped his arms around her from behind. She leaned back against his chest. Happy? He asked quietly. She tilted her head to look up at him. More than I knew how to ask for. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Good, because there are a lot of miles ahead. She turned in his arms, hands resting on his chest. Fuel prices will spike again. Driver shortages won't disappear. Insurance will keep climbing. Competition will get hungrier. I know. We'll have to fight. We will. Together. Always. She rose on her toes and kissed him, slow, certain, tasting like barbecue smoke and sweet tea and the kind of peace that only comes after surviving a war. Behind them the music played on. Laughter drifted across the asphalt. Trucks stood silent watch. Silent for tonight, but ready to roll come Monday. Horizon Logistics kept breathing, scarred, stubborn, alive. And for the first time in years, its future didn't feel like something to be taken. It felt like something to be built. Hand in hand, mile after mile, they stayed at the edge of the crowd until the lights began to dim and the kids started yawning against shoulders. Then they walked back through the tables, stopping to hug Robert one more time, to thank Marcus, to promise Carla they'd be at her daughter's graduation in June. When the last guest had gone and the bluegrass trio packed up their instruments, Alexander and Leslie stood alone in the quiet lot. He looked around, at the strung lights still glowing, at the empty chairs, at the place where they'd said yes to each other in front of everyone who mattered. Regrets? He asked softly. She shook her head. Only that we didn't find each other sooner. He smiled, small, real, the one that reached his eyes now without hesitation. Plenty of road left. She laced her fingers through his. Then let's keep driving. They turned off the lights one string at a time, walked to the SUV hand in hand, drove into the Georgia night. Horizon Logistics stayed behind them, quiet for now but steady, waiting for Monday, waiting for the next load, waiting for whatever came next, and somewhere in the dark, two people who had once stood on opposite sides of a conference table now moved forward on the same side of everything, and no more takeovers. Only building, only loving, only miles. If the parking lot vows under shipping strap arches, Marcus's toast with the raised cup of sweet tea, Robert's quiet tribute, or that final promise at the fence line already has your heart completely full, drop a below. Thank you so much for watching my story all the way to the end. Your support means everything. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.